Bill, good morning. How are you?
Doing well, guys.
Yes.
How are you?
Yes. Great to hear from you, Bill.
Our first never disappoints.
We have talked the last 63 minutes on the quarterback and what we saw on Saturday. I have tabbed my vote for Garrett Nussmeier as the guy coming out of spring that I'm most confident in winning the job going into fall camp. What was your evaluation of the quarterback position over the 15 practices that you covered and the spring game that you saw on Saturday?
I think Garrett Nussmeier made a statement in the spring game. He was excellent. I think he showed some moxie, showed, his ability to put the ball in tight spaces and make plays. That was what really stood out about Garrett. And that's, as you watch the broadcast too back, that's some of the things that stood out about him in high school. He has that fearlessness to his game. And, he talked about it earlier this spring, trying to corral that into the right direction, and I think he showed that in the spring game. I think for the most part, all the quarterbacks need to improve on their consistency and accuracy, and that was something that stood out in the over the course of spring practice. But Garrett really put that together in the spring game. Jayden Daniels, I think, actually finished the spring game strong. Mm-hmm. A lot of those throws late in the game for him were at least on the money. He led a touchdown drive. Was able to drop in a couple of passes that should have been touchdowns. And so I think his numbers were a little deceiving. I do think early on he was probably pressing, and you can tell he's still got to get better on his consistency. But even Brian Kelly was breaking it down kind of live in the game and saying that, this is some new footwork that he's working with. He's got to get more comfortable with it. And then Miles Brennan looked the part as well, I feel like. And at times, I think, with as much rotating as they did with the position groups, especially, in the second half here and there, they really didn't have a way to really kind of almost know your personnel that was maybe out there with you, which is kind of an interesting thing. So as they get those opportunities in practice with whether you're with the ones or the twos to develop that timing and consistency, sometimes that helps as well. So there was a little bit of shuffling here and there with the position groups as well that sometimes makes it interesting over the course of a game to adjust who you're throwing to and all that.
Bill, where did you find the competition out the fiercest? I think the quarterback, outside of that discussion, I think everybody was looking in that position. Where is the most fierce competition on the field after that?
I think it's got to be running back.
Yeah.
In a weird, it's a great position and it's a good problem to have. But Josh Williams played well. Armani Goodwin looked like the running back we thought he was going to be as a top 10 overall running back in the country, one of the best prospects in the country, and ran the ball really, really well. John Emery, even with his foot ankle deal, he was really good in a limited number of runs. I just think that position, when you add Noah Kane into the mix as well, is looking really good coming out of spring and dividing up those touches. Honestly, you can kind of see why Corey Kiner decided to transfer back home to Cincinnati. It's a difficult position to break through, and they're gonna get guys involved in the passing game. That was encouraging to see. That wheel route to cap things off, from Walker Howard to that pass, impressive, and even Corey Norman made that play. So it's a deep position group, and Noah Kane's not even here yet. That one really impressed me on the offensive side of the ball. And then I think defensive line is one that, has some competition. Who the guys are, but there are players that are pushing those guys like Mason Smith, B.J. Ojolari, Ali Gay. You look at Jacqueline Roy, Jacoby and Guillory, Bryce Langston had a sack. It's a deep group, especially in the interior for Jamar Kane to work with and for Matt House to kind of toy around with as far as alignments go.
No chance that scared Noah Kane away, right? After seeing all the depth that LSU was playing with, he wasn't intimidated by what was going on back there, was he?
No, I don't think so. I think he's going to finish things out in Baton Rouge for sure.
Billy Embody joining us. What did you make of the offensive line? Some of the rotations that we saw. We were talking a little bit about Xavier Hill. I thought had a really good day, but anybody stand out for you on that unit?
Not too much. Honestly, they had some issues at times with pass protection. And I think, piecing everything together, as they got Will Campbell out there at left tackle was probably the biggest thing that happened during spring ball. I mean, he was impressive, but the defensive line still got plenty of pressure. I mean, it's not a position that you feel incredibly good about just yet. You see the pieces starting to fall into place, which is important, especially Will, solidifying that left tackle spot. At least it looks like. But overall, I mean, there's not much depth. That they sailed the snap over Miles Brennan's head to kind of cap one of those drives, and that was a turnover. So whenever they get Marlon Martinez and Garrett Dellinger back, that center position, after Charles Turner, you got to at least get the depth there and still have that battle for that position, because if somebody goes down, that's going to be you got to have somebody that can snap the ball. And then the interior, I think they got some pressure on the interior. So, that's still going to be a battle. So not a position that you feel incredibly good about, but at least you saw Will Campbell really solidify that left tackle spot this spring.
The Rock Stars were back in Baton Rouge this weekend. Burrow was home. Chase was home. Jefferson was down here. Clyde Edwards-Helaire was back in Baton Rouge. Thaddeus Moss was walking the sidelines. Even Derek Stingley Jr., who feels like he's going to be a top 10 pick later this week in the NFL draft, was down there with him. Did that have any impact on recruiting, and what does it mean to bring those guys back on a weekend like this when there's so many hot prospects in town?
Yeah, that was talking about good timing. I mean, Dante Moore and Carter Tate, 2 5-star prospects on campus for official visits. They were able to meet with Joe Burrow and Jamar Chase and be around those guys. And, that's huge. I think that's impressive when you can obviously bring guys like that back. It's a big deal, and it shows, even with the new era with Brian Kelly coming in, that those guys are still coming back, even though they weren't here with him. That's impressive, and that speaks to just LSU and how those guys are still going to come around and be a part of the program and things like that. So that was huge. Derek Stingley Jr. was here as well, like you mentioned. He got a picture with Christian Gray, one of the top prospects in the country, and Tyrann Mathieu was talking with Michael Doherty and Ryan Yates. So, I mean, they really had everybody out there, it seemed like, and it really helped. I feel like, just, again, that added bonus of having those guys just there to meet with those players, even if just for a few minutes, it stands out to those guys. And those are the elite guys that these prospects are watching now in the NFL and with Sting soon to be watching. So it all helps and just added to the overall star power of a good recruiting weekend.
Where is this class standing right now? We talked to Mac Markway last week, who's one of the headliners of this class, and I was speaking to a staffer who said, look, Markway could probably start on the team this year just because of their need at tight end and his ability. How do you see this class shaping up? It feels a little bit more national than years past, and it feels like LSU really has a legitimate chance with some of these big-time, high-end national prospects.
Yeah, I would say it's shaping up fairly well. I mean, Dante Moore was on campus. He's a 5-star quarterback, #1 player in Michigan. If they can reel him in somehow, that would be huge. He's going to Oregon this weekend for an official visit, I believe. So his recruitment is starting to take on a little bit more of a national feel when some people thought it was maybe going to be hard for him to get out of the Midwest and pull him away from a Notre Dame or a Michigan. So that'll be interesting to see where he ends up. I mean, he is really good. I mean, he would be somebody that could probably come in and compete pretty early on, I would think, in his career if he ended up at LSU. So he's somebody that if you get on board this class, all of a sudden kind of the sky would be the limit from there. If they miss on him, I think they look at somebody like Ricky Collins, locally a Baton Rouge prospect who's committed to Purdue and has had a really nice offseason. And so there's some of your Louisiana flavor coming into play potentially. But yeah, I mean, you mentioned the national guys that they're on. Darren Reed, he's somebody that we had as a 4-star who should be in 5-star territory really. If the rankings ended today, he'd be a 5-star. He's one of the best defensive tackles in the country. He was on campus. He told me he's going to come back for an official, and LSU is right there with Ohio State battling it out with him. They had Ryan Yates and Michael Doherty. They're 2 4-star safeties on campus that are committed. And those guys are set to really take an active approach in recruiting. other players like Christian Gray, the 4-star corner who Robert Steeples has been recruiting. Dalen Austin is another 4-star corner that was actually on campus Thursday and Friday. He came away really impressed with the program, and he's long. He comes from California, so you're really looking coast to coast, because then you kind of get into the flavor of, Carnell Tate. He's at IMG Academy in Florida. If Dante Moore's impressed and that's trending well, maybe LSU can make a move for him as well, and he's a 5-star wide receiver. Some of the offensive linemen there on Chase DeSantis, one of the best offensive tackles in the country from New Jersey. Bryson Sanders, a 4-star offensive lineman who I think LSU's in a really, really good spot to land, is from Tennessee. They're really looking all over the place for prospects, and right now things are kind of trending well for them in some cases.
Bill, it looks like it was a pretty busy weekend for the running back recruitment. Trey Holly, who is one of the top players in the state of Louisiana, out of North Louisiana, and then Parker Jenkins, who's a speedster out of Texas, were both in town. Where do they stand in that position? And obviously Frank Wilson leading that recruitment has everybody intrigued on where they'll land.
Yeah, Trey Holly, is somebody that a lot of people have pegged for LSU for a long time, whether it was the old staff or this staff. And he's been on campus now a couple times this spring. I think LSU's sitting in a really, really good spot for him. One of the most productive players in the country at his position over the last 4 years, especially. He's, on pace to break the Louisiana high school rushing record, which is pretty wild. And he's kind of, 5'7", 180-pound back. He's built pretty well in a small size. Productive. I think LSU sits in the best spot to land him right now. And then Parker Jenkins is somebody who played as a backup on a really good Klein Forest team and averaged 9 yards a carry. And so this year he's going to get an expanded role. He's clocked a 10.66 in the 100 meters, so he's got that elite speed. I think even though he's a 3-star by everybody in the rankings, everybody has him really in that 3-star range where, okay, if he continues this production, he's going to shoot up into the 4-star rankings and be one of the best ranked running backs in the country. But he's been picking up Power 5 offers left and right this offseason, and LSU was a big offer for him. I talked to him before the offer, and he was telling me that LSU was a school that he really coveted. Now he got it. He ended up coming over to campus with a couple of his teammates, including Jelani Watkins, who's a 2024 top 50 overall prospect at receiver. But yeah, LSU sits in a really good spot to land Parker Jenkins now too, and I think he's really one of the best running backs in the country, and he's going to show it this year.
Billy, we talked to Landon Ibieta last week from Mandeville, and he is a guy that's speaking to some people around the program. There is an expectation for him this season to contribute, just not knowing where yet. Where do you imagine him having an impact in year one?
I think wide receiver is still a group that they're looking for consistent guys to step up. We've seen Brian Thomas. We saw Malik Neighbors. We saw Kyron Lacey get looks. Obviously Jack Besh and Keyshawn Butte will be big pieces, but they still need guys. And they we've seen them rotate receivers in the past under the previous regime, but this is probably a group that you want to develop, again, more consistency out of. We saw that from 2018 to 2019 when those young receivers stepped up and emerged into that best receiving group in the country. We want to see that continued growth from those guys if you're the coaches, and develop a group that's a little bit more consistent with the quarterbacks. But yeah, Landon is really consistent. He reminds me of Jack in that consistency realm. He's somebody that's a reliable pass catcher that finds ways to get open, and that's kind of probably the way that you would see him being used as a freshman.
So, Billy, how does the schedule work now as far as recruiting? Is it now get into recruiting season, or is there a calmness to it until the off season?
Yeah, there's still guys that are going to pop up on campus for visits before the summer, and kind of the second round of official visits really gets going in June. We'll see if they bring in any more guys for official visits now that the spring is over, but they'll still have unofficial visitors. And now it's time for the coaches to get on the road recruiting. Spring practices in Louisiana are going to start heating up. Spring practices around the country are going to start heating up. May is really the big month for that across the country in high schools. So we'll see the coaches get out, evaluate prospects, probably dish out some new offers, and go check in on their top targets, their commits. I imagine like Terry Cooks will go see Michael Doherty and Ryan Yates here pretty soon. Mike Denbrock will go see Mac Markaway. They'll go check in on Omarion Miller, who's their 4-star wide receiver committed in Louisiana. And they'll go see their top targets and show them that, hey, you're a priority. They can go see them twice this spring, I believe, is the rule to evaluate them. And so that the coaches will get on the road and do that. And then the month of June is camps. LSU has, their offense, defense camp. They'll have skill position camp. They'll have 7-on-7 camp. They'll have their elite camp. And they'll also host official visitors before the dead period hits in July, and then fall camp, and we're into the season.
We got a question coming in for you, Billy, about the latest on Efton Reed and Adam Miller. Just to change sports real quick over to basketball. Are you hearing anything about where those two guys can land?
Honestly, it's been kind of a holding pattern right now. I know Adam Miller did take a visit to TCU, but he didn't commit. At least right away, hasn't made a decision from what I'd heard. Efton Reed, I believe I saw he was at Virginia Tech recently, so both of them are still going through the process of trying to figure out what they want to do. As of yesterday, I hadn't heard that they had made a decision either way. So both of those guys are still, have the potential to return.